I think the single greatest skill that you can develop in your life is the ability to remain in a good internal state when there is nothing actively rewarding you for it. Most people experience their mood as a reaction. If things are moving forward, they feel good. If progress slows, uncertainty sets in. When validation appears, energy rises. When it disappears, so does motivation. This creates a fragile psychological economy where emotional stability is leased out to circumstances that were never really designed to sustain it in the first place. Life is largely composed of neutral moments, long stretches where nothing dramatic happens, where effort does not immediately compound, where clarity is absent. If your internal state depends on visible confirmation, these periods become unbearable. Learning to be content in the absence of reasons is not a passive trait, it is actually an active skill. There is a difficult truth that people often avoid. The psychological traits that tend to produce success in business, competition, or ambition frequently conflict with the traits that make for a peaceful inner life. Progress is driven by dissatisfaction, and contentment is built on sufficiency. Ambition requires noticing what's missing, and happiness requires recognizing what is already adequate. Trying to collapse these two into a single state often leads people to sacrifice peace and justify it as drive. And over time, this trade can become expensive. One of the biggest obstacles is how the mind evaluates risk. Human cognition is biased towards threat detection. The brain exaggerates potential losses and downplays potential gains. Because this bias once increased survival odds. In modern contexts, however, it creates paralysis. Failure is mentally simulated as catastrophic, and success is mentally simulated as abstract. If you take failure apart carefully, it loses much of its imagined weight. What actually happens if things go wrong? Money may disappear, momentum may slow down, status may decline, yet food remains accessible, shelter remains possible, breathing continues. There's almost always a couch somewhere, a safety net of some sort, a way to survive long enough to recalibrate. The floor is significantly lower than the mind insists it is. Success is treated very differently. People underestimate how much it changes their internal landscape. They pursue it while assuming it will feel incremental, manageable, ordinary. This explains why people who succeed often say things like, they didn't expect to arrive where they did. They could not emotionally model the upside. The mind inflates the cost of failure and minimizes the value of success, which produces hesitation, delay, and chronic overthinking. This is where the skill becomes relevant. When your mood is no longer contingent on outcomes, risk becomes tolerable. When emotional stability is decoupled from success, experimentation increases. People often assume confidence precedes action. In practice, though, emotional neutrality does. Being able to operate without emotional reward allows you to keep moving when feedback is absent. There's a useful psychological principle here. Humans respond to contrast, not absolutes. Gratitude doesn't arise from objective goodness. It arises from comparison. Abundance dulls perception. Scarcity sharpens it. When everything is available, nothing really feels valuable. When something is rare or fragile, its importance becomes immediately apparent. Instead of constantly raising expectations, it is often more effective to lower the reference point. This doesn't involve self-denial or pessimism. It involves remembering what is actually required to remain functional. Food, shelter, air, and basic health. Everything beyond that is technically a surplus. When surplus is recognized as surplus, emotional volatility decreases. Many people attempt gratitude by listing pleasant things, but this rarely works long term. Contrast is more effective. Comparing current circumstances to the minimum viable existence creates a meaningful psychological gap. This gap stabilizes mood. The mind stops demanding more simply to feel okay, simply to feel like itself. Another issue arises with advice. Advice is rarely incorrect. It is usually incomplete. General rules sound compelling until they collide with individual temperament, timing, and context. People struggle not because they ignore advice, but because they attempt to implement all of it simultaneously. A more functional approach would look like this. Identify what draws your attention consistently, not what earns admiration. Filter external opinions based on whether the source bears consequences similar to yours. Produce enough volume that improvement becomes statistically unavoidable. Understand that a long enough time frame and all of your outcomes will dissolve into nothingness, into insignificance, and offer help where possible. Because contribution stabilizes meaning more reliably than achievement. These are orientations rather than instructions. Here's the paradox. When emotional well-being no longer depends on success, performance improves. When fear of failure diminishes, risk tolerance increases. And when outcomes lose existential weight, clarity emerges. Detachment from results does not reduce ambition, it actually refines it. Being in a good mood without justification does not mean ignoring reality. It means refusing to let reality dictate internal equilibrium. This capacity produces psychological resilience. It allows movement through uncertainty without constant self-negotiation. And over time, the skill compounds quietly. You begin to trust your ability to adapt rather than your ability to predict. You stop waiting for permission to feel okay. You stop treating progress as a prerequisite for peace. And from that place, sustained effort becomes realistic, becomes possible. Most people search for motivation when what they need is emotional autonomy. Mood that survives boredom, stability that persists through ambiguity, presence that doesn't require applause. This is not dramatic, it's subtle, and is by far the most valuable skill you can develop. I am rooting for you. You have an amazing day.